It's in my house and I don't know how to stop it. The tape, the one I wasn't supposed to watch, it's playing on every screen. My TV, my laptop, even my damn phone, there's no escaping the horrifying visuals. I can't turn them off. And I can feel them, moving in the static, a sensation that chills me to the bone, a presence I can almost touch. The little girl from the tape, she's here. I saw her in the hallway just moments ago, standing there, smiling. That empty, knowing smile, and now I can feel the others. Their presence is growing, pressing in on me. Something is being pulled across the floor, a slow, wet, dragging sound. It's coming from the other room, approaching steadily. I shouldn't have pressed play. That single decision unleashed this terror. My only hope is to warn you. I need to tell you what's on that tape, everything, before they find me, before it's too late for me. The tape is rewinding now, a strange mechanical feeling in the air, then nothing, absolute terrifying silence. 3 days, just 3 days, that's all it took for my world to unravel, to twist into this impossibility. It started so innocently, you see, as these things always do. A mundane Tuesday afternoon, a detour I didn't plan. I was driving home, probably thinking about cheap takeout. Then I saw it, this new thrift store. It was tucked away on a side street I rarely used. A gaudy, grand opening banner flapped limply in the breeze. Curiosity, that insidious little spark, got the better of me. I pulled over, a small, seemingly harmless decision, yet it was the first step onto a path I can never retrace. The true beginning of the end, though I didn't know it then. The place was typical, a musty smell, a jumble of forgotten lives, old clothes, chipped crockery, worn-out furniture, and there, a dusty bin overflowing with forgotten media. A chaotic tangle of ancient CDs, scratched DVDs, and a surprising number of those old VHS tapes. It was an impulse, pure and simple. I wasn't looking for anything, really. Just browse, but then I saw it. It wasn't even remarkable in its physical appearance. Just a standard black VHS cassette, worn, a little scuffed, probably older than I was. But what made it stand out, what snagged my attention and wouldn't let go, was the label. It was handwritten, not neatly printed, not a professional sticker. Just scrawled in what looked like hurried, almost desperate handwriting, thick black marker, and the words, they burrowed into my mind the moment I read them. Watch me alone, all caps, stark, absolute, no other details, no title, no date, no production company, just that command, that chilling, singular instruction. It felt less like a title and more like a challenge, or a warning, a deep, primal part of me, the part that screams, run, when faced with obvious danger, began to prickle. But another part, the foolish, arrogant, modern part, dismissed it as a quirky gimmick, a piece of outsider art maybe, or just a forgotten prank, harmless, just an old tape. I picked it up, felt the weight of it. It felt colder than the other tapes somehow, almost like it was radiating a subtle chill. I told myself it was just the air conditioning, or my imagination. I took it to the counter, tucked beneath a stack of old paperbacks I'd decided to buy on a whim. The cashier was a young kid, probably high school age, looking bored out of his mind. When he saw the tape, his eyes widened slightly, just a flicker. He didn't touch it, not directly. He slid it across the counter with his index finger, pushing it towards the scanner. He moved it as if it were contaminated. His expression was unreadable, but I sensed a definite reluctance. A touch of fear, maybe. I laughed it off internally. Kids these days. Probably just thought it was some weird indie horror film that gave him the creeps. I paid, grabbed my bag, and walked out. The strange little tape now nestled amongst my purchases. An anomaly in my otherwise unremarkable day. I had no idea I was bringing a virus into my home. The moment I got back, the tape felt different. Not physically, but its presence. It sat there on my coffee table, an inert black rectangle, but it seemed to hum with an unspoken promise, or threat. That handwritten label seemed to glow, almost, in the fading afternoon light. Watch me alone. The command echoed in my mind, growing louder, more insistent. It became less of a curiosity and more of an obligation, a dare I felt compelled to accept. I debated for hours. I debated, rationalized. Perhaps it was a psychological experiment, a found footage film, a lost art project, anything to dismiss the growing unease. That unease crawled up my spine, but the deeper truth was I was just curious, morbidly, dangerously curious. I told myself it was just a tape, a piece of plastic and magnetic ribbon. What harm could it possibly do? I waited, and that waiting was perhaps the most crucial part of this entire nightmare. I didn't want distractions. I didn't want interruptions. The label's command had rooted itself deep, so I waited until midnight. The house was utterly silent, save for the distant hum of the refrigerator. The street outside was quiet, dark. The perfect environment for whatever this was. I retrieved my old VCR from the back of a closet. It was a relic gathering dust, hadn't been used in years. But I still kept it for some nostalgic reason. Now, that seemingly innocent act of keeping a forgotten piece of technology felt like a premonition, a trap set years ago, just waiting for the right bait. My fingers trembled slightly as I held the tape. Just nerves, I told myself. Excitement, a bizarre thrill. I slid it into the VCR, heard the familiar whir, the soft clunk as it settled into place. Pressed play, the screen on my television, which had been a comforting, familiar black mirror, flickered to life. Static, briefly. The kind of grainy, imperfect static that only VHS tapes could produce. Then a picture resolved, and at first, it was exactly what I'd expected, or hoped for. A home video, totally mundane, comfortingly normal. It looked like Christmas. Cheap flashing lights strung haphazardly across a living room, a slightly crooked plastic tree in the corner. The camera, handheld and a bit shaky, focused on a family. A man probably in his late 30s, early 40s, with a slightly receding hairline and a kindly, if tired, smile. A woman a few years younger with bright eyes, gently teasing him. And a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, small, with pigtails, absolutely bursting with excitement, trying to tear open a present that was clearly too big for her. They were laughing, talking. The sound was muffled, a little warbled but clear enough. Their voices, their joy felt infectious. I found myself smiling, a strange sense of relief washing over me. See, just a home video, a sweet, innocent moment captured forever. The irony of that thought now is a bitter taste in my mouth. Forever, yes, captured forever and then some. I watched them exchange gifts, heard their easy banter. It was so ordinary, so human. And that ordinariness was the hook, the lure that pulled me deeper into the trap. It made me drop my guard completely, but then it shifted. It wasn't a sudden jump cut, not a glitch at first, more like a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the atmosphere. The light seemed to dim slightly, even though it was still Christmas morning on the tape. The laughter seemed to echo just a fraction too long. The little girl's movements became a little too fluid. A little too uncanny, and then there it was, just a flicker, a sound, a glitch in the audio, like the tape momentarily warped, stretching reality itself. And through that brief, horrifying distortion, a child's voice, clear and cold, utterly devoid of the warmth I just heard, whispered something, a question. It was the little girl's voice, but not her voice. It was her voice, but different, older, colder, empty, and she asked, clear as day, as if she were in the room with me, "Daddy, who's that behind the camera?" And then the dad, he turned, slowly, deliberately, his head swiveled on his neck, his eyes, which had been smiling in kind moments before, now fixed on the screen, fixed on me. He was looking straight out of the television. His expression wasn't confused or curious. It was knowing, and then the transformation began, right there, on the screen. His features started to stretch, not cartoonishly, not like a special effect, more like clay, slowly being pulled and molded by an invisible, malevolent force. His jaw elongated, his eyes widened into dark, sunken pits. The skin seemed to tighten over his bones, stretching his face into something gaunt, monstrous. The smile, the kind smile, remained, but it was now a horrific rictus, revealing too many teeth too long. His eyes were still on me. They reflected nothing but cold, empty malice. I screamed. I didn't even realize I was screaming until my throat ached. My body reacted without thought. I lunged for the VCR. My hands were shaking so violently I almost missed the eject button. I slammed it, heard the grinding whir as the tape slid out. I ripped it from the machine. Holding it away from me as if it were a venomous snake, I tossed the tape onto the floor, scrambling backward, away from the television, away from the VCR. The screen went black, just a dead, reflective surface again, but the image of his face, his eyes, they were burned into my retinas. I sat there huddled against the opposite wall, gasping for air. I tried to rationalize, to explain. It was a trick, a cleverly edited horror short, a viral video, a nightmare. Anything but what it felt like, but deep down I knew. The cold dread had sunk its teeth in. The absolute silence of my apartment felt heavier than before. The dark reflection of the TV screen seemed to hide things. I knew I had done something terrible. I had invited something in, something was watching, something had seen me. And I knew with a horrifying, gut-wrenching certainty that it was too late. I had pressed play, and the game had already begun. The immediate aftermath of that first viewing was a whirlwind of frantic disbelief. Sleep, if it could even be called that, refused me. Every shadow seemed to deepen, stretching into grotesque caricatures in the dim light of my apartment. Each familiar creak of the old house magnified, sounding less like settling wood and more like deliberate movement. I kept trying to convince myself it was a nightmare, a vivid hallucination brought on by exhaustion and a morbid imagination. A trick of the mind, nothing more. But the tape, that inert black rectangle, still sat on my coffee table where I'd thrown it. It felt like a silent, malevolent presence, even with my eyes closed. Its handwritten label, "Watch Me Alone," seemed to almost pulsate in the dim light of my living room, a constant, mocking reminder of my fatal curiosity. I must have drifted off eventually, some primal need for rest overriding my sheer terror, but it wasn't a restful sleep. It was a fitful, shallow oblivion filled with fragmented images, the dad's stretching face, the little girl's eerie giggle, echoing laughter that held no joy, the unsettling feeling of being watched even in the depths of my subconscious, and then the jolt, a harsh, sudden illumination that tore through the darkness of my eyelids. My eyes snapped open, my television screen, it was on. Blaring, filling the silent room with its cold blue light, and on the screen that same grainy, horrifying footage, the Christmas scene, the family, the mundane prelude to utter dread. My breath hitched, my heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drum in my chest. It was playing by itself. I hadn't touched the VCR since I ripped the tape out the night before. I hadn't touched the remote. The power had been off, yet there it was. The camera panning across the Christmas tree, the presents, the familiar, ordinary furniture of their living room. But this time, something was profoundly different. The resolution seemed clearer, the edges sharper. Too sharp in a way that felt unnatural, and the space on the screen felt deeper, more real. The room on the tape seemed to extend beyond the confines of the screen, as if it were a window into another, horrifying dimension. Then I saw them, not yet fully on the screen, not within the frame of the video itself, but reflected, in the glass of the television, a flicker, a movement behind me. My blood ran cold. I whipped my head around so fast my neck protested. Nothing, just the dark, familiar outlines of my own living room, the couch, the armchair, the bookshelf, all as they should be, inanimate. I turned back to the screen, my eyes wide, desperately scanning the reflections, and there they were again, just glimpses. In the polished surface of my old wooden cabinet, in the dark glass of the framed picture on the wall that showed a smiling version of myself, years ago, before any of this, they were in my house, the family from the tape. They were everywhere in the reflections, not solid, not tangible, not yet, more like distortions in the fabric of my vision or glitches in reality itself. A fleeting outline in the hallway archway, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the darkened kitchen doorway, as if someone had just ducked out of sight. They weren't fully corporeal, not yet, but their presence was undeniable. My mind screamed for a rational explanation, but there was none. This was beyond reason. Whispers followed. Soft, insidious sounds, not emanating from the television speakers, but from the air itself, from behind closed doors, just at the very edge of hearing, like a radio tuned slightly off frequency. The little girl's voice, the one that had asked the chilling question, was the clearest, always asking, always the same question. Can we play? It was a child's voice, yes, eerily perfect in its imitation of innocence, but utterly devoid of any genuine warmth. It was a cold, demanding sound, a chilling promise of unspeakable games. Each time it sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins, a cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Can we play? Over and over. Until the words lost all meaning and became just a terrifying, senseless sound that echoed in the silence of my home. I tried to deny it, to rationalize. My mind raced, frantically searching for any explanation that didn't involve the supernatural. A power surge, perhaps, a bizarre electrical glitch in my old VCR, maybe a hidden timer on the TV, a setting I'd forgotten. No, this was too deliberate, too personal. The tape was playing, the family was here, their reflections mocking me from every reflective surface. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that it was because I had watched it. I had let them in, I had opened the doors. Panic began to set in, real, blinding panic that choked the air from my lungs. I had to get rid of the tape, destroy it, erase it from existence. If the source was gone, if the conduit was broken, surely they would be too. Surely they would vanish back into whatever abyssal realm they had crawled from. I scrambled to the VCR, my hands clumsy with terror, and pulled out the cassette. Its black plastic felt heavier now, colder than it should have been. It seemed to pulse faintly in my hand, as if with a malevolent heartbeat. My only thought was fire, incineration, total annihilation. I ran outside, stumbling a bit in my haste, into the cool night air. The freedom of the open sky felt like a brief, desperate respite from the suffocating dread within my home. I clutched the tape tightly. My only thought was fire. I found an old metal trash bin in the yard, one I used for yard waste, and dumped some old newspapers and dry leaves inside. Then a can of lighter fluid. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the can, spilling the volatile liquid onto my clothes. I doused the contents of the bin. My entire focus was on the tape, on its destruction, on ending this nightmare. I lit a match, the small flame feeling inadequate against the vastness of my fear. I tossed it in. Flames erupted, orange and hungry, roaring to life. I watched mesmerized as the paper and leaves caught fire, the flames licking hungrily at the black plastic shell of the tape. It began to melt, to warp, to twist into grotesque, bubbling shapes. A small, desperate victory. A surge of almost dizzying hope washed over me. This was it. This was the end of it. The fire would cleanse everything. The physical destruction of the tape would somehow, magically, cleanse my space, my life, of their insidious presence. I went back inside, collapsing onto the couch, my legs weak with exhaustion and lingering adrenaline. I watched the orange glow through the window as the bin continued to burn, a small beacon of destructive triumph in the dark yard. The TV was still on, but mercifully the screen was blank. Just the persistent, low hum of the static, a sound that no longer felt benign but sinister. I finally allowed myself to fall into a fitful, exhausted sleep, convinced the nightmare was finally over. The fire would fix everything. The fire had fixed everything. I woke the next morning to an unsettling quiet, too quiet, no hum of static from the living room. For a moment, a wave of profound relief washed over me. It worked. It's over. The terror of the previous night seemed distant, almost unreal, like a bad dream dissipating in the harsh light of dawn. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching, and walked into the living room, my steps tentative, hesitant. My eyes immediately went to the VCR. It was off. The TV screen was black. All good. Everything was normal. Then my gaze shifted to the shelf, the small built-in shelf above the fireplace where I kept a few old books and some trinkets. And there it was, sitting perfectly pristine, the black VHS tape, the one I had just burned. There was no sign of melting, no scorch marks, no ash on the shelf, no residue on the tape itself, just the familiar, inert black rectangle, looking as if it had never been touched, never been subjected to the inferno I had unleashed upon it. And the label. The handwritten label had changed. The original "Watch ME" alone was still there, its chilling command faded slightly, almost like a precursor. But beneath it, scrawled in the same thick black marker, were new words, fresh, bold, undeniable. They looked as if they had been written moments ago, wet and stark against the matte black plastic. You're in the movie now. A cold dread far deeper and more absolute than any I'd felt before settled over me. This wasn't just a recording. This wasn't just a cursed object. It was alive. It was adaptive. It was intelligent. It was learning. And it had put me in its story. My world had become their set, my life their script, my reality their screen. The realization was a blow, physically painful in its finality. There was no escaping this. The days that followed blurred into a continuous waking nightmare. My sense of time became warped. The TV would turn on randomly, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes in the dead of afternoon, always to the same tape. Sometimes it would be just a flicker of static, sometimes a full scene of the Christmas party, but always the presence grew. I saw them in reflections more clearly now. Not just shadowy distortions, but distinct, fleeting figures, always just outside my direct line of sight. The dad, his gaunt, stretched face unmistakable, his eyes always on me, filled with an ancient, cold malice. The mom, her bright eyes now hollow, her smile a chilling parody of human joy. And the little girl, always giggling, always whispering her unholy question, her presence the most unsettling of all. They weren't just in reflections anymore. I heard them. Footsteps upstairs when I knew I was alone downstairs. Muffled conversations from rooms I knew were empty, sounding like a party happening just beyond a closed door. the distinct rustle of clothing just around a corner as if someone had just moved past. I would whirl around, heart pounding, only to find nothing. But the feeling of being watched never left. It was a constant, suffocating weight, an invisible shroud around me. Every breath felt heavy with their presence. They were learning, adapting. Their appearances became bolder, their movements more defined. The dad's hands, I swear, appeared longer in the reflections. His fingers seemed to stretch, unnaturally thin and elongated, almost reaching out from the mirrored surface like he was trying to pull himself through the static into my world to finally make contact. The family on the tape and the family in my house were merging, becoming one insidious entity. And I was trapped within their narrative, a helpless, unwitting character in their horrifying film. My life, their script, my reality, their screen, and I was the star of their chilling show. The days turned into an endless, terrifying cycle. Time itself seemed to distort, stretching thin then snapping back with violent force. Every moment was measured by the encroaching, undeniable presence of the family from the tape. My house, once a comforting sanctuary, was now a mere stage for their slow, relentless invasion. I was trapped within its walls, a prisoner in my own home, a reluctant star in a horror film I desperately wanted to escape. My every thought, every breath, was consumed by their advance. The little girl was the worst. Her giggles, though unheard by any other living soul, echoed inside my head. They were a constant, chilling soundtrack to my waking nightmare, a high-pitched, discordant melody of pure malice. I saw her in the shadows, a fleeting movement, darting behind furniture, a blur of tiny limbs. Her small, smiling face would peek around a doorway, her eyes wide and unnervingly black. She just watched me, always watching. Her gaze was a cold, constant weight. The dad, his form growing more defined with each passing hour, seemed to observe me with an unnerving calm. He'd stand motionless in the hallway, often just out of direct sight, a looming, silent sentinel. I'd catch a fleeting glimpse of his impossibly long fingers, almost claw-like, resting on the doorframe. He never moved quickly. His presence was a slow, agonizing dread, a suffocating pressure. He was a silent predator. And the mom, she was the most insidious, the most deeply unsettling, her humming. It was a soft, wordless tune, a melody of madness, always just beyond audible range. It was a lullaby of profound evil, a comforting melody twisted into something profoundly disturbing. It would start faintly, a mere suggestion of sound, then grow stronger, seeming to emanate from the very walls around me, vibrating in the floorboards. It was everywhere. I tried everything, every desperate, illogical attempt to reclaim my space. I boarded up windows, nailing planks of wood over the glass. I covered every reflective surface with blankets and sheets, mirrors, polished wood, even the screen of the turned-off television. I stuffed towels under doors, hoping to block them out. Anything to break the connection, to sever the invisible thread that bound them to me. But it was useless. The tape had changed the rules of reality itself. My attempts were futile, pathetic gestures against an unstoppable, invisible force. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a teacup. The static, it had become more than just a sound. It pulsed, it vibrated. It was alive, a sentient, oppressive presence. It seemed to seep from the screens, filling the air with a subtle electric hum that only I could perceive. It felt like a living membrane, thickening, pressing in on me from all sides. It was the medium through which they traveled, the very air they breathed, and now the air I breathed. My laptop, my phone. They became extensions of the horror, portals to their realm. I'd try to use them to reach out, to find help, to send a single word of warning to anyone. But the screens would flicker. The Christmas scene would flash into horrifying clarity, replacing my desperate messages. Their faces would morph into the distorted, monstrous versions I had seen on that first night. I couldn't escape their gaze. There was no connection to the outside world, no help coming. I was utterly alone. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. My body was a vessel of pure, unadulterated fear, fueled only by adrenaline and the sheer terror of their presence. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble of desperate, half-formed plans and overwhelming despair. I knew this was the end. My mind was unraveling, piece by agonizing piece. The line between my fragile reality and the tape's twisted world was blurring, dissolving entirely. I am recording this, now, at this very moment, as a final, desperate warning, a testament to what has happened. If you ever, for any reason, find a tape like this, a dark, silent, unassuming object with a chilling, handwritten label, don't watch it. Don't even touch it. Don't let curiosity, that insidious poison, infect you. Because once you press play, they don't stop. They don't just stay on the screen. They don't just haunt your reflections, fleeting images in glass. They crawl into your world piece by agonizing piece. They twist your reality until it is unrecognizable. They become your reality, a living, breathing nightmare. and then they find you, they come for you. The air grew heavy, colder, a sudden sharp drop in temperature that stole my breath, making my lungs ache. I could feel their presence now, a palpable weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. Not just their sounds, not just their fleeting images, a physical manifestation of dread. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against my chest. A sound, faint at first, a dull, rhythmic thud from the hallway, growing louder with each passing moment, each beat resonating deeper. It wasn't the wet, dragging sound I'd heard before. This was a deliberate, heavy impact, like something large, something impossibly heavy, striking the door with brutal force. My door, the one I'd barricaded with every piece of furniture I could muster, the one I'd tried to make impenetrable. The thudding continued, relentless, methodical. Each impact vibrated through the floorboards, through the air, through my very bones, shaking my resolve. The wood groaned under the assault. I gasped, my breath hitched, caught in my throat. I could see shadows under the door, long, distorted forms stretching and writhing like living things. They mocked my futile defenses, my pathetic attempts at safety. They were definitely at the door. There was no denying it now. They had come for me. The humming began again, the mom's chilling lullaby. It was louder now, closer than ever before. A soft, relentless drone that filled the oppressive silence of the room, vibrating in my teeth. It was right outside, right there, an intimate terror, a promise of dreadful comfort. And the dad, I heard it, a distinct, sickening scratching sound, against the wood of the door itself. Long, scraping noises, drawn out and grating, as if something with impossibly sharp talons, not fingers, was trying to claw its way through the solid wood. The sound tore at my nerves. A low, guttural growl accompanied the scratching. Not human, never human. A sound of immense, ancient hunger, a primal roar of anticipation. It was trying to get in, and it was going to succeed. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling uncontrollably, my entire body rigid with terror. Then the little girl, a whisper, not from the door, not from the hallway, a voice clear and cold, utterly devoid of warmth or playfulness, right against my ear. My skin crawled, my blood froze in my veins. The air around me crackled with malevolent energy. "I'm in your rooms." It was a statement, not a question, a declaration of absolute victory. I squeezed my eyes shut, paralyzed by a terror so profound it stole my voice, robbed me of any last gasp. My body tensed, anticipating the inevitable, the final touch, the cold embrace of their arrival. Then I heard it, the soft, mechanical hum, the whir, that familiar, chilling sound, the VCR, powering on, somewhere in the room. The tape was playing, for the very last time, my story, their movie, their final triumphant scene. A wave of static, not just a hum now, an overwhelming, all-consuming rush of white noise. It filled my ears, my head, my very being. It was the sound of my reality dissolving, my consciousness fading. It was the sound of their triumph, the sound of everything ending. Then silence, absolute, all-encompassing, nothing, just the void, the end of the film, the end of me.